Hi everyone. So we decided to record the first part of what we will be doing in discussion for week 5 on behavior-driven development. So yeah, I hope you enjoy and I hope you find this useful. Oh, and there's Dorothy, by the way.
Hi,
We got
everyone. Okay. All right, so I'm going to start off. This week we'll be working with Cucumber, and the focus of our discussion will be on how to write scenarios and implement them. So this week we're starting off with a very simple to-do list app that Derek built last week in his section. So here's what it looks like. Okay, so this is what the app looks like when you first get there. There's a form to create tasks. So if I create a task, like click create task, a task called film section video is created and it populates this list below. So our goal today is to add a feature to this app that lets every task have a completed field. So we can still make tasks in the same way, but for every task, we can open the task up and like maybe click on a checkbox that says completed. And when we save the task, we should see the completed tasks filtered into a new list of completed tasks where the old tasks are still in the uncompleted task section. All right, so let's get started. So here is our shared Cloud9 workspace.
So Dorothy, you're going to be the driver, right? And I'm going to be the...
Yeah. So we're going to do pair programming. And so for the first part, I will be writing out the scenarios and implementing the web steps. And then we're going to switch off. And Derek is going to actually implement the features. Okay, so let's start. So the first thing we need to do is add the Cucumber gem to our gem file so that we can use it. So we're going to write a separate set of gems for just testing. And we will be using 2 gems. We'll be using the Cucumber Rails gem and then also a database cleaner. All right, so after we add that,
So Dorothy, can you show us what the Cucumber Rails and database cleaner repo look like on GitHub?
Sure, I can do that.
I'm just curious to find out what like database cleaner is.
Yeah, so this is Cucumber Rails on GitHub, and it has some instructions. See here, is exactly what we've just done. And down here, we're going to run the commands later. And oh wait, what were you curious about?
I'm just curious what the database cleaner does, so I wanted to see the description like right underneath.
So yeah, so database cleaner is a set of strategies for cleaning your database in Ruby. It's used to ensure a clean state during tests. Let's see. There's a lot.
Yeah, so yeah.
Is there a section you wanted to read?
No, I just wanted to just take a look at it and just to know what it does. I think from previous knowledge, I think it basically like before and after every scenario, it like makes the state of your database the same, so you can make sure your tests run with that assumption that the state of the database is what you want it to be. So yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
All right. So now we're gonna follow these instructions. So we're gonna run bundle install and then run the Cucumber installation. Multi-rails. Okay. All right. So we now if we look in our directory, we can see that a features folder was created, and there's step definition folder that we can populate. All right. So now that we've added Cucumber to our project, the next thing to do will be to actually create our feature file and write out the steps for our new feature. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Okay. We'll call it complete task.feature. And the feature will be complete a task. Right. So now we're going to describe the feature. So as a to-do app user, so that I can know when I've completed all my tasks, I want to be able to mark a task as completed. Okay, so here we've described who the stakeholder is, a to-do app user. We've described the reason why they want to do this task, which is to know when they've completed all their tasks. And then we actually state what the action is, and that is being able to mark tasks as complete. All right. So then the scenario is going to be the actual steps or actions they walk through to do this task when they're on the app. So the scenario is going to be called something very similar, completing a task. Right? Okay.
So how do you think we should make this look like?
Yeah, so at this point, it's good to stop and to think about, what steps the user will go through. So as Professor Fox has mentioned in lecture, usually there's a set of preconditions that have to happen first, and then there's some action that the user takes. And then after the user takes that action, there are other things that you need to check about the website to see if you have the expected behavior. So what do you think maybe one precondition in order to complete a task would be?
So I'm thinking that in the root page which you showed on the website, we need to be able to like click on one of the tasks, and then it takes us to another page where there's a checkbox that allows us to basically complete a task, and then we could submit that form.
Okay. So I guess when we run through these scenarios with a user, would we be saying all of that detail, or would we be saying something like, oh, they see the tasks, so maybe the user sees these tasks, decides to complete this task, and then the user, should see the task in the completed section and not in the non-completed section. So I guess it's a debate as to how much detail you could go into. Yeah. Okay. All right. So why don't we go ahead and maybe start listing out some preconditions that we need to write to set this up.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, so we already saw here that this is the page we need to be on in order to create tasks. So maybe the first thing we need to do would be to navigate to this page. So let's see. One moment. Okay, so we can write something like, given I see the list of tasks. So this list of tasks just means we're on the page with all the tasks. And the next thing in order to complete a task that we'll have to do is to actually create the task. Let's say something like, given I see the list of tasks and I create the following tasks. And maybe today we have 2 tasks. one is make dinner, and the other is go for a run. All right. So after we make these tasks, then we can get around to the action that we were talking about, which would be completing them. So maybe let's just complete one task so we can check if the tasks end up in different places. So when I complete the task, make dinner, I should see the task make dinner under. So I'm going to choose to identify the div or box in which we place our tasks by their ID for testing. So that syntax will look something like under completed tasks. And I should see the task go for a run under non-completed tasks. All right.
So Dorothy, is the user gonna, like, in the root page, is there gonna be like two lists?
Yeah, so
okay.
I think I alluded to this a bit earlier, but yeah, the idea is that the user goes in and can see a list of non-completed tasks, and maybe there already are some completed tasks, but completes a task and saves that action. When the page refreshes, they should see the task they just completed underneath the completed tasks.
Okay.
Cool. All right. Now that we've written our scenario, we can try to run the Cucumber features and see what happens. And what we should expect to see is that all the steps are yellow because we haven't written any of the step definitions to handle these cases. Yeah, so we scroll up, we can see all of the steps and they're all just yellow, saying that they haven't been defined. So the next thing we need to do is define all the steps so we can actually run code beneath the steps. So that file is going to go in step definitions, and I am going to call it task steps dot. Okay. So yeah, if we go back to so if we look at our list of steps, the first step is seeing the list of all tasks. So that's going to be pretty simple. So if we open up task steps, that's going to look something like given, and then I see the list of all tasks. We can just match it directly. We just want to go to the home page or the root page. So we'll just say something like visit slash, because that is the path to the home page as before. There's nothing trailing here. All right. So if we run Cucumber again, we should see the first step pass.
So Dorothy, actually a comment on I see a list of all tasks. Do you think that's the best description of, because basically what this is doing is we want to show that they're going to a place where they can create a task, right? Because that's the next step. Does that make sense?
Right. Okay. No,
So
that's true.
maybe
So
it should be like when I see the create form or something.
yeah, that actually sounds a lot better. So why don't we do that instead?
Okay.
Also, I wrote the wrong step, so it didn't actually match. Let's change it to, so given I see like the task creation form, is that what you said?
Yeah. Or a form to create tasks.
Okay. So then we can change.
I think if you go back to complete task, you forgot the in the complete task that feature.
Oh no, I'm sorry. All right.
Cool.
No. Okay. So I'm just gonna run it so you guys can see that it does pass. But for the rest of them, I probably won't run it until I finish writing the step. Okay. Okay. So yeah, so it's green, which means that we
Cool.
successfully implemented that web step and it passed.
Mhm.
All right, so the next step is called, and I create the following task, and it has 2 tasks. So we'll just use when, but all of these keywords are an alias for the same method.
Hmm.
So when I create the following tasks, okay, and then there's a space, and then we'll just capture the entire string that's there and then split it up later. Oops. Do tasks. All right, so right now we have a string with several tasks in it. You can see them down here. And we need to split that up into like an array of tasks. So what we'll do is split by the comma. Tasks equal tasks. Okay. All right, so now we just have an array of the tasks. And then for each of the tasks, we want to use Capybara to fill in the form and submit the form, just like how we did over here when I typed in it and clicked create task. So task.each do task. All right, so we have to get rid of the quotes on the side of every task because otherwise the cast name will be created with those strings. Okay, and then we will fill in the task description box with the string that we want. So the first argument to this function is going to be the name of that field. And if we just inspect here, we can see that the name of the ID is actually task description. So we'll use the ID here to make things simple. Okay, task description, and then we'll just give it the string for the task. Okay, and then to click button to actually save it. So we'll do click button. Okay, so that looks good.
Does task description need quotes around it, or is
yeah, it does. I just totally didn't type them.
cool?
Thank you, Derek.
Yeah. So what's happening is your task is like a string of task. It starts out as a string. Okay.
Yeah. So
And
tasks is a string, and we split it by the comma to like split up into an array of strings where each string in that array is like the name of the tasks. And then for each of those tasks, we create a new task.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. And the G sub quotes is to remove the quotes from the string because
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
the regex includes that.
Yeah. So down here,
Uh-huh.
oh no, like down here, right
Mhm.
there. Yeah, that the string of tasks is going to include. We don't want that
Okay.
when we create our tasks.
That sounds good.
Okay. I'm just gonna. Great. So the next step we're gonna work on is when I complete the task.
So it looks like it failed.
Oh no.
So I think it's pretty clear, right? It says we must pass a hash containing width. So I think in the fill in method,
Oh,
we
right.
need a width.
Yes.
Yeah.
Forgot about that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. That's over here. So
That's
it's
what
gonna
pair
look something like
program is for, right?
this. Yeah. Or I guess we could do.
Yeah, that's the same syntax.
That's fine. Okay. Okay. Cool.
So these should pass because we actually already have this functionality, right?
Yeah. So we already implemented. Yeah. So it's green now. So we already implemented task creation.
Mm-hmm.
So this should work, and it does. Yeah. So that makes sense. Cool. So now we're going to write a step definition for completing a task. And that is something we have not implemented yet. So that should fail. But we should implement that task, that step definition based on how we think we're going to implement it. So the step is called when I complete the task. So we'll just add that down here. And then we're going to capture, I think here, since we just have one task, if we put the quotes on the outside, then we should be able to just capture the name of the task inside and not have to remove the quotes. So that should work. Do task. Okay. All right. So in order to complete the task, what are the things we have to do? Like you were saying earlier, we have to somehow navigate to the edit form of the task. We have to maybe check off a checkbox for completing the task and then save all that information. So for simplicity, I think what we're going to do is clicks on the name of a task that will just take us to the edit form. So the first thing we're going to do is click
I think it's called click
on.
_on. Yeah.
Click on task. And then we're assuming we're going to have a checkbox for completion. So the function to fill it out is called check. And let's just assume that it has an ID of task completed, similar to the task description we had up here. We'll fill it out. And then maybe our button is going to be called update task. So when we click that button, it should save the data and we're good to go. All right. So if
I
we
think we should call it update task because it's.
Did I spell that wrong?
Yeah.
Okay. There we go. So if we run this, it's going to fail because it's not going to be able to click on the task names because they're not links yet. So I'll run that. But while that's going, we'll just go ahead and implement the last step definition, which will be for the last two steps, and that's to check that we see the task under completed or not completed. So yep, here, oh no. Does that have a space? What happened? It didn't match. Oh, there should be a star. That's why. Okay. Okay. Now it should be fine. Yeah, so the scenario we just typed failed because it was unable to find the link or button make dinner. Okay, so that's what we expected. All right, so let's go ahead and implement the last step. So let's just copy this and we'll go ahead and define it. All right. Okay. Wait, all right. Okay. So the first thing we captured was the name of the task. And the second thing we captured was the ID of this, the div we're going to put the task in. All right. So using Capybara, we can look into that div. So within there, we can assert that the page has the task inside. All right. Okay, this looks good. We'll run that after we actually implement it.
Okay.
Okay.
Dorothy, are you still there? Okay.
Yeah, I'm still here. But I think I added the step definitions and the scenarios I needed to. So I think I'm probably going to hand it over to you now.
Okay, that sounds good. So now that we have all the specs, I'm going to have to go ahead and get them to pass, right? All right. Let me switch over to my screen. Okay, share. Cool. All right. Do you see my screen, Dorothy? Hello?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay.
There's some infinite recursion going on right there.
Yeah. Wait. So.
All right.
Okay. Let's fix that.
Okay.
Let me try again.
This is why quiz answers. That's what I told them to go. Oh yeah, I see. Oh, yes. The first MCV 32 is so small.
How does that look? Is there any more recursion?
What?
Yeah, like that's already.
Okay, it looks good now.
Okay, cool. All right, so I would think, all right, so we have a task here. So the first thing we need to do is like create a link such that we can click on the task and it takes us to an edit form, right?
Yeah, actually, what can you go back to the cucumber scenarios and look at the first thing that failed? So the first thing that failed was not being able to click on a name, which is why we're implementing this first.
So
Yeah, so we saw that the first two steps passed, and then when I complete the task, make dinner, that one fails because we're not able to click on make dinner. Yeah.
right, so it's this part that's failing, right? The when I complete the task, click on task. Okay, so let me go ahead and implement that. So right now, this is the HTML and embedded Ruby for our root page, which is basically this one. So I think there's a method called link to, right? Which is a view helper in Rails that basically generates a link for us. We could actually look at the documentation here, link to. So, okay. Cool. So we can see we could pass a string and then the path of where we want to go to. So let's go ahead and do that. We can use interpolation to basically create a string of the description here. And to find the actual prefix, let me run rake routes. Cool. So while that's running, let me pull up the route file as well, which should be here. So these routes are being generated from resources task, and we can see we want to go to the edit action, and we see the prefix is
prefix. Okay, yeah, cool.
Edit task, right? Cool. All right, so let me go there. Type edit task. And we're iterating through the task here, so we could just pass in the actual task. And
wait,
then,
did you forget something in the prefix name?
Yeah, I think I forgot. So everything is either has a suffix of path or URL, so I'll just go ahead and use path here.
Okay.
And close the embedded Ruby and refresh the page. Okay, so I'm getting error. And it's saying no keyword end. So I forgot to actually put the end here.
Oh, yeah.
I have a do block. So
yes.
do that. Then, cool. So we can see this looks like a link. Let's go ahead and inspect it. And sure enough, it looks like a link. So that's what the link to method in Rails does, is that it generates the HTML for this here and returns it to the browser so that the browser can render this link. So let's click on it. Okay, so it says the action edit cannot be found for task controller. So let me add that to the task controller. Def edit. And then we want to go ahead and find that task.
So how do we know that's where we should get the ID from?
Sure. So whenever when there's a link, there's this Ruby hash that's returned, which is called params. If you look at the server, you can see that there should be a params here. I was thinking it would be in the server logs.
I think, you know, when you inspect it, actually has the ID embedded in the link that was there.
Right, this right here.
And then you can see it when you do rake routes kind of as well.
Right. So basically Rails is taking this. We can see from the routes that you can specify the ID here, and it transforms it into this Ruby hash called params, which then we can query the ID. So let me refresh again, and then click on the link, and it says we have a template missing. Okay. So let's go ahead and add the view edit.html.erb. And this is going to be under the task directory because we're in the task controller. It's the assumption that Rails makes when you want, for mapping the views to the controller actions. All right, and let's say, let's add HTML here, edit task. Cool. So if I refresh now, oh, it shows. Let's go ahead and see that from here. All right. And now that if you look at the server, you can see that there's this parameters passed in with ID equals 1. So before it wasn't showing it because it was erroring out beforehand, but now that you can see it's actually passing parameters.
Cool.
Okay, cool. So do you think we should run the specs now and see if everyone passes?
Yeah, so we should probably be able to click on the link, but I don't know if we're going to be able to complete a task yet. But let's just run it and see what happens.
Okay, cool. Rate cucumber, right?
Yeah, I think that will work.
Okay. All right, so it looks like it didn't fail at the place it failed beforehand, right? It's saying unable to find checkbox now. So I guess now we would have to create a form, right, Dorothy?
Yep. Yeah, and we have to make sure that the checkbox we're filling out has that ID.
Okay, cool. So let me go back to our edit view here and add a form. So there's another view helper in Rails called form4, which generates the HTML for a form easily. We could pass the task instance variable, which we define in the controller here, wherever my controller is. All right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yep.
What this form4 method does is it gives us a form object which has other methods to generate HTML. One of them is like a label. So we want to be able to edit the description. We're not going to use this in our actual feature here, but it's just good to have because it's good to be able to edit a description of a task. So let's go ahead and just add this. Description. And we also need the completed checkbox, which is important for our feature, and to get the specs passing. So let me add that. And then a submit button at the end, so we can submit the changes to edit the task. Cool. All right, let's refresh and see what happens. Okay, there's completed. There's a text box to edit the description. There's a checkbox to edit the completed flag, and then we have a button to update the task.
Cool.
All right.
So what happens?
So I think.
When we... Oh, yes.
So should we go ahead and try to submit it first?
Yeah. We should. Yeah. Either way is okay.
All right. Let's do it through the specs because that's why we wrote them, right?
Yep. So
Let's
what happens when we run?
All right. Okay, so we don't have a method action update. All right, so first of all, like what's happening here, right? This is the form for method, which I defined here, somehow is like assuming that we have this method update. How does it know that, right? The reason it knows that is because there's a task variable here. It knows that it already exists in the database. So what Rails is assuming is that we want to update this task, right? This goes, so yeah, let's go ahead and look at the HTML really quick, and you can see this is how it looks like. So we have our completed and our description. So now let's go ahead and add the update method in the controller. Right. And we can see also in, go ahead.
Is that update method what is getting called when you press update task?
Yeah, I think what we could do is look at the URL and the HTTP verb and see if that corresponds to our routes. I don't know where it went, so I'll just run it again. All right. So we can see here that we have task ID and it goes to task update, but you can see that it's actually patch and put versus post. So that's a little weird. Let's go ahead and look at the HTML again. All right, so like you can see there's actually an underscore method patch here. The reason why we need this is because natively browsers only support get and post and some other ones like head, but not patch and put. So Rails like creates these HTTP verbs for us, but in order for Rails to know that it's a patch, it also needs to like specify this here and pass that in as a parameter to our Rails server. So we can think of this as actually a patch rather than a post. Is that right, Dorothy?
Yeah, that makes sense as to why it would be called patch instead of post.
Yeah. So basically like Rails is kind of like overriding the post here and making it a patch. And it does that by passing this input value. Okay.
So it's like another input in the form, basically, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. So let's go ahead and submit it and see what happens. Okay. So it says we need a template, but we don't really want a template here. We just want to be able to update the task and then redirect somewhere. So let's go ahead and add the logic for that in the controller. So let's go ahead and So I think the first thing is like, I don't really have a completed column in our task table, right?
Oh, right. We can't actually add a completed flag to a task because it doesn't actually have that data saved in it yet.
Right.
Like, yeah, if you look at a task, or I guess the schema.
Oh yeah, the schema. We could do that too, which is under DB schema here. Oh, interesting. Oh, I'm sorry. Is this
Oh,
is this the
no.
right? Okay. Well, anyways, we can check the. Let's go ahead and check the actual Rails console and see if we have completed. Oh, look, we already have it. Okay. So
Okay.
that's okay. I guess if we go ahead and okay, this is really interesting.
Okay.
So it actually doesn't have it in the migration file. So
Did you? Okay, but you did reset it, right?
right.
Okay, it's fine.
Let me.
Okay.
One thing I could do is reset the database, and then we can see if it actually only has one column.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it definitely has it, and it has it in the schema, so it's definitely going to exist. So let's just reset the database because that shouldn't be the case. It must have been we were playing around with this before, and the database's state is not the same as what we think it should be. So let me.
Okay.
Cool. All right. Let's go ahead and fire this up again. Okay, so when we reset the database, it also like removes all of the data in our database. But let's go ahead and check the column names now. All right. Cool.
Okay,
so
that's what we want.
right. Okay, so now let's go ahead and add the completed column.
Okay.
This is what it was intended to be. So let's go ahead and do this. We can do that through a migration. So let's do Rails generate migration, add completed to tasks, and let's specify what we want here. Okay. So what this command is doing is, as Armando like showed in lecture a couple of lectures ago, is that it's creating a file for us that allows us to, it's called a migration file, that tells the database that we want to edit, basically edit its the database so that it has this column completed. So if we go here, we can see this new file is created. You can see it created code for us automatically. It knew how to do this because of the fact that I specified completed Boolean, and it knows how to match that. If I put add completed to task, it can match that and say like, oh, okay, so now you want to add a column. So with this sort of like structure of the file name, it knows to basically generate this code. So let's go ahead and make a default value for the column, because if we don't, then it's going to be nil. And what we really want is just false and true in our database. So let me just go ahead and do that. All right. So now that we have the migration, we actually need to run it to tell the database to basically add the column. So let me do rake db migrate. All right. All right, so now if we go ahead and go to Rails console, if it allows me to click on it. Sometimes Cloud9 debugs on me, so let me just fire up another one. the third tab is not allowing me to click on it for some reason. But okay, now we see that the column exists. That's good. Now we can actually specify if the task is completed or not. So let's go ahead and go back to our controller. So I guess the first thing to do is understand what's being passed into this, right, Dorothy?
Yeah, so how do we get all of the information from our form? Is it similar to how we got the ID from before?
Yeah,
Or...
yeah, it is.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess this was the previous time I submitted the form. You can see that it's passing in certain parameters. In this case, the description, which is film section video, and one corresponds to true. So you can see that that's what it's been trying to pass over into the Rails app.
Okay, so
let's go ahead.
So how would we use that data to actually change the task of interest?
Sure. So like when the request is made, when we submit the form, it's going to go through this controller code because it's specified in the routes. And then we can basically first get the task. So that. All right. So this should get, since the params ID is the ID of the task that we're updating, it should find the task that we want through the actor record interface, right? And then from there, let's go ahead and update the task. And I'm just going to put a bang because I want it to error if it's unable to update it. If I don't put a bang, then it's just going to return true or false, and it might fail silently. So just a small detail. Don't need it. Yeah.
Okay. So above, you have in your create action, you pass in description and you point it to the description value in params. Do you have to do that for every single attribute you want to update, or could you just pass like a hash of like mappings of what you want to update?
Sure. So you're saying something like this?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we could do that. There's this thing called strong parameters where if we pass this in, we can't, basically it's going to be a hash of values which correspond to this, right? But there actually may be like a bad guy that inserts other parameters in there that could edit the database in a way that we don't want it to. So let's go ahead and actually see what this does first. So it would be a little more clear. Okay, refresh this. Okay, couldn't find a task because we reset our database. But let me add another one. And let's try to complete it. Okay, so it's saying forbidden attributes error. And if I go ahead and Google this, basically what's going to tell us is what I mentioned before, in that by doing this, anyone can, like a bad guy could enter in other parameters that edit the task in a way we don't want it to. So you have to actually specify exactly what parameters you want to be edited. In this case, description and completed.
Okay.
So should we go into how to do that, or should we just specifically edit the parameters in the update method, the description and completed ones?
Well, I think, sorry, what was your question? I think you can just use what the syntax you used above.
Like this?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Let me go ahead and do that. and then completed, right? Grams. Okay. So really quick, I think I wasn't too clear on what I was saying before, but the other way to do this that Dorothy was mentioning is if we were to do it like this, where we just pass in the entire hash of parameters, we would have to basically specify exactly what parameters we want to update in our task. And the reason we do this is because of security issues. So I could also go like this, for example, where I do params, dot update, and then we could require the task. And then as shown in Stack Overflow, we can permit description and completed. So we could do something like and completed. So I guess this is option one. These would do the same thing. Option one, and then option two. All right. Again, the reason why we don't need to use permits or require in the option two case is because we're specifically specifying the exact parameters that we want. So there's no security issue there. So for the sake of simplicity, I'm just going to use option two for now. All right. And I think we want to redirect to the root page, right, Dorothy? Because that's where we're going to include the lists.
Yep, so that's where we're going to see the tasks sorted out as their proper lists.
Okay. All right. So we shouldn't see this error anymore. Let me go ahead and update the task. All right, so no errors. That's good. Should we run the specs again?
Yeah, we should see what happens.
Okay. Wow. See that?
Huh?
Like it overlapped the terminals.
Oh no.
Yeah, I don't know why my third terminal is not allowing me to click on it, but it's not. All right. Cool. So now the third step is complete, is green, and before it was red. So it looks like something happened good, right?
Yeah, I think we were able to implement it correctly.
Mm-hmm. And we could also check in the console that task is now completed true. Cool.
So what's our last failing task or step?
Okay. So I think it's going to be this one, right? These two?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so what this is telling me is that we want one list of completed tasks and another with tasks that aren't completed. So in order to do that, we need to go to our root page here and add those two lists. All right.
Okay.
So let me start by saying non-completed tasks. Add a header here. And we also want one that's completed task. All right. Also, actually, really quick, I want to go back to the steps for a second. And
Okay.
so we're able to see that we check task completed, right? So like it's definitely like working. But how were we able to know that task completed was what the selector was going to be on the form? So let's go ahead and go back here and see the form and inspect it. So you can see that we have task underscore completed here. So Rails is making the assumption that when you have this form for method with f.label completed and f.checkbox completed, it's going to create basically the model underscore and then the column. So this is how basically we were able to know that we wanted to check task underscore completed, which is right here. Okay, did that make sense, Dorothy?
Yeah, that sounds really handy for checking the contents of forms. Yeah.
Okay. Let's go back here and okay, so now we need a way to split up non-completed tasks and completed tasks, right? So we should do that in the controller. So let's go back to task underscore controller. And in the new method, instead of querying all the tasks, let's go ahead and update this where this is going to be non-completed task. And we can use the active record method called where, which basically allows us to specify a hash where we can query certain columns, in this case completed, to false. That means it would query, it would get all the tasks where the completed column is false. And then we could do the same here, where completed is true. All right. So now that we have defined these two instance variables in our controller, we could go back to the view and iterate through those that are non-completed and completed. All right, completed. I'm going to copy and paste this. All right. How does that look? Looks pretty
Looks good.
All right, so let's
yeah.
refresh the page. Oh, sorry, this is the edit path. So we completed hello, which is nice. Let's go ahead and add a non-completed task. You can see that my descriptions are very, very grammatically correct. So by default, the column is going to be false, right? Because that's what we specified in the migration. So you can see now that we have a non-completed task of do homework. Okay, so let's run the specs and see if it fails or succeeds. All right, so now it's saying copy bar element not found completed task. Okay, so where is that coming from, right? Well, if we go back to our complete tasks features, right? We assume there's going to be a selector, this ID selector called completed task, right?
Yeah. But did we include that in our view?
Yeah, we didn't. So let's go ahead and do that. All right. Was it
I think it's the
okay?
second.
Non-underscore completed.
Yeah.
Non-underscore completed task. All right.
Okay.
And then we do the same here to make this completed task.
Okay. Now what happens if
So-
you run? Oh, what were you saying?
Oh, I was just going to go back to the steps file and show like basically what the within method does is that it scopes whether this page has content within this HTML element, which in this case is this list here, which corresponds to this. But let's go ahead and run it and see that in action. All right, we're still getting something that's failing. Undefined method has underscore content. Okay, the reason why that's failing is because we misnamed the method, it looks like. Oops. Here. So we want to put the question mark here. Let's run it again. So basically, this method here is going to return true or false. We know that because by convention, if you have a question mark on as a suffix of a Ruby method, it assumes it returns a Boolean. So yeah.
Wow, it's all green.
Cool. So we made all the specs pass. So our feature is working now. Yay.
Oh.
Cool. Let's play around with this a little more and see.
Okay.
Task. All right,
Okay.
so go here. Completed. All right, now it's completed. Let's uncomplete it and see what happens. Cool, now it's back on uncompleted. So it looks like everything's working. And we know that because, well, first we can see it in our browser, but also that we made the specs passed in our Cucumber specs. So yeah,
Wow.
the user would be happy.
All right. Okay. Does this conclude our pair programming video?
Yeah, do you have anything else
Okay.
to say?
No, I don't think so.
Cool. So yeah, thanks for listening
Cool.
and bye.
Bye.